Welcome, I'm Tom Abinanti, Assemblyman for the 92nd Assembly District, which is Greenburgh, Mount Pleasant, and a small piece of Yonkers. Every so often we bring to you a little discussion with a special guest about some of the issues that are affecting us in our community and are being dealt with here in Albany. Today I have a gentleman named Matt Gaier. Matt's a Westchester resident, happens to share a profession with me. We're both lawyers. Matt, where'd you go to law school?
I went to NYU Law School.
NYU Law School. So did I. What year?
87.
Oh, you're a lot younger than I am, a lot younger. And you live in the northern part of the county?
Yes.
You're up in Katona?
Correct.
And you practice law?
I do, in the city.
And what kind of work?
Medical malpractice, other personal injury, but primarily it's focused on medical malpractice.
So you're a trial lawyer?
Trial lawyer.
And you're doing that work that everybody is looking at these days and saying, that's terrible stuff. Medical malpractice, you're suing doctors, isn't that terrible?
Well, I hope not everybody's saying that.
Why do you do that?
Well, to me it's really the best way to make a living. You're doing something for people who've been injured, you're people who've been wronged, you're helping them, and you get paid for helping people. What could be wrong with that?
You know, it's very interesting, because when I came out of law school, I was looking for a way, I was one of these idealistic kids, and I was trying to use the law to accomplish what I thought should be the goals of society. I ended up moving into the political field, into government, and I did law basically to make a living. I tried to take a lot of cases that were in the public interest, but I found the way that I could contribute was working directly in government. But I've seen a lot of other people, whether they're in the legal aid office, whether in the DA's office, or whether they're doing things like you're saying, representing victims, because that's our system. And a lot of people don't understand that we have an adversary system. We don't have a system like some of the other countries do, where they appoint somebody and say, go do what's right. And sometimes that person does do what's right, sometimes they don't. Our system is one where it's both sides hire lawyers, they go into court, and the judge and a jury make a decision. Sure.
It's a system that works in the criminal process, and why shouldn't it work equally well in the civil process? It brings out the truth. And it's not perfect, but it's the best system we have, and we're very proud of it.
You think it works in the medical malpractice field?
I think it works very well, yes.
You know, it's very interesting. We don't have, really, from what I've seen, a good supervision of the medical profession. I mean, what I always tell them when they ask me, what do I think? I say, it's a terrible system to have lawyers supervising doctors, but it's the best system we've been able to come up with.
Well, that's right. I mean, there is, you know, there are efforts within the medical profession to police itself, but they've been very ineffective. There's something that's sometimes called the white wall of silence, where doctors are loath to impugn other doctors, and it's not that everybody adheres to that, but some do, and they don't want to prosecute each other necessarily, and as a result, they don't police themselves all that well. That's why the civil justice system is the best means of deterrence of bad medical practice.
Now, you've been doing this for a while.
Over 20 years.
What do you think of our hospitals? Are they safe?
Well, I wouldn't want to impugn all the hospitals of the state of New York, but unfortunately their record is pretty poor. A recent study that I saw in the last couple of months puts them down among the rankings in the country, down in the bottom 5. And that's pretty surprising when you think of the state of New York and the city of New York with all of its resources that were that low in terms of hospital safety is pretty astonishing, I think.
Okay, so what do we do?
Well, what you'd like to do is improve the system by taking basically rudimentary measures to improve patient safety. The New York Times reported in March of this year on a study that was done at New York Presbyterian Hospital, a study that was conducted. It was a program that was conducted between 2003 and 2009. And it was reported in an obstetrical journal just in February, and the Times wrote about it because it was a remarkable thing. What they did was, in their obstetrical department, they implemented a patient safety program of fairly basic, rudimentary type stuff, having a chain of command up from the chair of the department down to including all the attendings, residents, down to nurses and technicians were all involved in this chain of command, and other measures such as color coding medications, putting dosages of medications in advance so that it's not done on the spot to avoid overdosages, things like that. And what I thought was the most impressive, most important part of what they did with this chain of command was they empowered all people within the chain to speak up, and not just empowered, but encouraged. It was their obligation to speak up if they saw there was something that was being done wrong medically in a particular case with a patient. So that if a nurse within an obstetrical department sees that a patient is not being handled properly, that they're looking at the fetal monitor and they're seeing what they regard as a dangerous fetal heart pattern, which is often the sign of which you want to take measures and sometimes remove the baby expeditiously by cesarean section. The nurse is now empowered to say to the doctor, "Doctor, look at this fetal heart pattern. I think we have to do something." It goes against the grain of what comes natural. Doctors don't want to hear sometimes a nurse telling them what to do. I'm the doctor. Well, this hospital implemented this program where nurses or other underlings would be required to actually say something's not happening right here and you need to do something.
So they basically took apart the medical system and said, why do we have malpractice? Let's deal with each piece of it, and let's try to solve the problems that lead to malpractice, as opposed to concentrating on the cost of malpractice of lawyers and insurance companies and all that kind of stuff. They basically went to their own system and said, let's try to stop malpractice.
That's exactly what they did. And what was interesting, they did this at a time. They started this program in 2003, and it was put in the works in 2002 at a time when malpractice awards in obstetrical cases started reaching higher levels. And this has to do with the care that children who are injured at birth, neurologically impaired children, gets very costly. And with medical inflation, as everybody knows, has gone up quite a bit in the last 15 years. So it was starting to get higher. So their malpractice insurer actually approached them and said, we want you to implement a program to see if this will reduce malpractice and reduce the costs. And I got to tell you, the results were absolutely amazing. From 2003 to 2009, they got to the point where in 08 and 09, they didn't have any brain damaged babies born at in this department.
So the system worked.
It worked. They had no Erb's palsy. Erb's palsy is what happens when a child is being delivered and you get a condition sometimes called shoulder dystocia, where the child's shoulders get stuck, the head comes out, and you have to get the baby's body out. And there's a couple of maneuvers that need to be done, and when they're done properly, the baby's shoulders are freed without any damage. But sometimes, when it's not done properly, they injure the brachial plexus, and it's a permanent neurologic condition that affects the child's arm for the rest of his life or her life. And they eliminated that as well. And from a financial perspective, what happened was a 99% drop in their malpractice costs by the end of this program. They had basically eliminated all the costs attendant to malpractice just by patient safety.
So their high insurance rates actually worked to stimulate better medical care.
Well, I would say the threat of lawsuits is what worked to stimulate better medical care.
Now, why isn't everybody else doing this?
It's a good question. I don't know why everybody else isn't doing this, and they should be. Every hospital in the state should be required to implement a program along the lines of what this hospital did. And it doesn't have to be limited simply to obstetrics. You can take the same concepts, because they're basic safety measures, and implement them through all departments.
You know, it's interesting. We had this conversation when we were passing the budget, because the governor was concentrating on the lawsuits.
Yeah, I heard something about that.
And he was trying to limit when you could bring a lawsuit and how much you could recover from a medical malpractice lawsuit, and was trying to set up some kind of a program so that rather than collecting money directly from a judgment, you would get paid through a fund. The assembly plan was very similar to what you're talking about. It would subsidize, or would have subsidized, malpractice insurance costs of hospitals, and reward those that reduced their malpractice rates and not reward those that didn't. And so if a hospital adopted the protocol that you're just talking about and reduced its malpractice rates, if its insurer didn't reduce the rates, then we would step in and give them a reward. On the other hand, the hospitals that continued to have high malpractice rates would continue to pay the high malpractice rates and maybe continue to pay even more to the state of New York and be penalized. So it was an attempt to wake them up and say, the state of the art works. Right. Why aren't you doing it? Unfortunately, we were not able to get a partner in that plan. And what we came out with was something of a hybrid. The lawsuits will still continue, but there will be a fund, which I don't particularly like, because I think what the fund does is just put the state in between the parent of the child and the pot of money that they won to take care of that child. So I'm not happy with it, but it's better than what the governor had proposed.
Well, I'm familiar with the legislation that passed, and yeah, I'm not a big fan, because what it ultimately does is it affects the choice of the family and of the children who are receiving this care, and limits their choices. Without getting into the details of it, everybody except doctors are going to be reimbursed at Medicaid rates. And that right there reduces, for instance, many of these children often need custodial care, home attendants to help take care of them. And it's a personal thing, because these are the people who are with the child and with the family 24 hours a day, very often. Sometimes 8, sometimes 16, but very often 24 hours a day. And they become a part of the family, and you should have the free choice of being able to choose who you're comfortable with and who your child's comfortable with.
Or even move to another state if you want.
Well, that's that
we don't know how that's going to work.
We don't know how that's going to work.
You know, too often this is seen as lawyers against doctors, but I think the history at Columbia Presbyterian shows that it doesn't have to be that. That it could be good doctors supervising those who make mistakes. Because what I'm hearing is a very small number of doctors who account for most of the medical malpractice.
I think in New York State, I don't have it exactly down, but it's roughly 7% of the doctors commit something like 68% of the malpractice in New York State.
So if we could get a handle on that. I always look at the legal profession. I mean, our profession has come down very hard on lawyers who make mistakes and lawyers who commit some relatively minor transgressions. And yet I don't see the same thing happening in the medical profession.
That's right, and that's why we exist, to make sure that they improve.
I have these conversations. A little bit of disclosure here. My daughter is a doctor, and so we have some great conversations over Thanksgiving dinner. You know, but I try to make these points to her, and I think the better doctors understand that the whole goal here is to provide better health care for people. This is not about litigation. This is not about insurance. This is not about protecting people or doctors. This is about providing better health care for patients.
Sure. Look, the best part of that that New York Presbyterian study that I referenced is that these children, you know, were born and they're going to live healthy, normal lives.
Right.
It's devastating when you suffer an injury at birth like that, and it's devastating for the family and for the children. And the fact that they've eliminated that's the best part of the whole thing. If we could do this statewide, I would be thrilled, and I'll find another way to make a living.
I think that's a good way to end. I think that's an excellent comment. You're working to make sure that there's not more generations of lawyers living on the proceeds of medical malpractice claims. I want to thank you for joining us. I think it's a very important issue. And if anybody at home has any comments or would like to reach me, please don't hesitate to contact my office in Tarrytown. The telephone number is 914-631-1605. Or go on the web and look for us on the NewYorkStateAssembly.gov. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks very much.
We'll see you again. And please join us.